Hello everybody, welcome to the Justflight 146, recently released. It released with a few bugs, but hats off to Justflight. They've been absolutely amazing on fixing the bugs and listening to the community. Sorry, I had to just watch the American land then. So yeah, hats off to them, it's fantastic. Now the FMC is still not working very nicely or at all for me. I'll wait for that, but the rest of it's working pretty good, and so we'll hop inside. So the aim of this video is just purely to show the autopilot. I've set up a little bit for flight, but if there's anything otherwise wrong, I haven't looked at anything else. It's just about the autopilot. Like there's a flight recorder message off here. I don't even know where the flight recorder is yet. I haven't flown this aircraft enough, but we're set up here to do a departure, a SID, out of Phoenix Sky Harbor to Los Angeles. We're going to head, and here's the departure, the Buckeye departure. So this will show us quite well how the autopilot works. I'm not going to fly the departure fully. I will at the beginning, but then I'll just do some free flying, some autopilot modes demonstrations. So we're on runway 8. It says here climb on the heading 078, runway heading to 1550, then climbing right, turn heading 080 at 4 miles east of the PXR VOR, climbing right, turning heading 100. There's quite a lot to remember. And then after that, radio vectors to the Buckeye VOR. So I have the Phoenix VOR tuned. That's for the DME here. And then I have the Buckeye also tuned, and that I've done, you can see over here in the captain side nav. There's a switch here that can switch between the active frequencies, top or bottom. I tend to keep it the active one at the top, then it's familiar to me, and on the left here you can switch the frequencies like this. You see the frequency switch. So yeah, and you can see here the DME is down here, well obviously here in digital too. So if I tune to, I've got the Phoenix VOR here at the top. I've also got it on the right hand side here, so it's useful here. We've got the DME twice, and I'm going to leave this one in the first officer side, and when we heading towards the Buckeye VOR, I'll switch to VOR 1, which will be 116.0, and then I will get the information here on the left side, the DME, and of course then the needle, VOR needle will be here, and also the needle here in the RMI, the thin needle, will tell me where the Buckeye VOR is, and I can fly direct to it. All that will come. So that's how I set it up. What I do is, it said fly runway heading, which is about 078, I think it said. So we can do that here. So heading is runway heading. Then I've got my first heading, turn right 080. I tend to do that over here, just to remind me. And then it said turn, what does it say, 100 or? Then turn heading 100. So I'm going to put that on the nav too, just to remind me. They're just figures I can get reminded of there. So what do you need to know about the autopilot? Yeah, it's not, I fly a lot of this style of aircraft, or this era of aircraft, even older, so it's fairly familiar to me, but it might be a little bit unusual to you if you're used to flying more modern aircraft. First thing about it, how do you turn the autopilot on? Well, that's down here. You need your damper on, autopilot in, autopilot off, autopilot back in. So that's I've got a hot switch here. So you can see if I turn the autopilot on, you see, look at the yokes there. I'll explain that in a moment. Actually, no, I'm not going to explain that for the moment. So, but here, people get confused with this button here. Look, if I'm pressing this button, there's nothing happening. That's just an indicator to tell you that down here the autopilot is on or off. So I'm going to disengage the autopilot now. The light extinguishes and the yokes return to neutral. So that would be the autopilot on. And then you've got autopilot modes here. Like, some of them are pretty straightforward. heading mode, the autopilot, if the autopilot on, the flight directors are on, it will fly to this heading bug, which you select here, and if you press it, it will engage it, and press it again, it will disengage it. LNAV, actually that will be when the FMC works. It doesn't work yet, so we'll leave that. Turbulence, yeah, that's, you can read that in the manual. We don't really need that at the moment. It's just to create a smoother flight. The modes we're going to use a lot are heading, VL, so if you have a radial tuned here or an ILS for the approach, or a VOR approach, you can press VL. That stands for VOR or localizer. So whatever frequency you have here as the active frequency will fly that heading, or sorry, radial or the ILS, and you select the needle here, so that would, you would select your ILS heading there, or ILS course. So you're going to use heading, if you're flying manual headings, or VOR or localizer for ILS on the VL. Then we're going to get into, so you could say they're your lateral modes, your horizontal modes, so vertical modes, like VNAV. VNAV illuminates, but it doesn't actually work, and in the real aircraft of this style it didn't work anyway. The button was just there, but there was no function for it. Mark, yeah, we'll get into that later maybe, but just basic autopilot. IIS you'll use a lot. When you press ILS, whatever your speed is down here on this indicator, the aircraft will hold that IIS by speed and pitch. If you, there's a bug here, you can see, not a bug, a speed bug. This is just a reference. This doesn't affect the speed of the aircraft at all. This is just a reference. So if I want to, I'm going to climb out here, let's say at 220 knots. So it's just a reminder that I want to climb out IIS 220 if I want to do that. Or we can climb out on vertical speed. When you press that, again like the IIS, the vertical speed at the time when you engage the vertical speed VS button, the plane will hold that vertical speed. Now, if you try to manually change the vertical speed when the autopilot's on, it's in VS, or trim the aircraft, you'll disengage the autopilot. So there's a real cool feature we'll get to in a moment. Altitude is altitude hold. So if you're coming up to an altitude, you get to 10,000 feet, you need to stop there, you can press alt hold. And this is for the glide slope. So if you're on an approach, you'd press glide slope localizer. Of course, it's not picking up any signal at the moment, so let's see what happens when I put it on the Phoenix VOR. Yeah, so now we've got an active, you can see down here the active VOR. Now it will engage. That's not an ILS, so the glide slope won't engage. But how do you level off? Normally you got to select your altitude here. On this SID it says top altitude is 8,000 feet, so I'll use that as a demonstration to level off at 8,000 feet. So we select that here and press altitude arm. It's like alt cell in the famous dash, majestic dash. So make sure you select your altitude and engage alt arm. Okay, a bit long-winded, but got to explain these things. Next thing quick before the end of this first part video is the mode annunciator panel here. So if I just go down and zoom in a bit here, so you can see at the moment I've got nav1. Let's just flick out of that. So we've got nav1 means we've got an active VOR here. Okay, your damper's engaged. Let's engage the autopilot. So if I engage the autopilot, there's no modes engaged here at all, so it will just hold pitch and roll at the time when I engage the autopilot, which is pretty cool. Disengage that. So, but there's another cool feature here, and it's called, if I just press this button here, oh no, got to put the autopilot on, and then press this button, sync. What that does is, like, you can take manual control of the autopilot to adjust pitch and roll. So that's kind of useful. Like I said before, if you're climbing let's say you're descending at 2,000 feet a minute, you've pitched the aircraft down to 2,000 feet per minute here, and then you're in the descent, and then you want to descend slower or less, lower rate, so 1,000 feet. What you do is, the aircraft was flying straight and not in a turn, you'd press sink. The plane would hold its attitude, and then you can manually push on the yoke or pull on the yoke, in this case, to pull the nose up, decrease the vertical speed. When you get to 1,000 feet per minute descent like you want, then you press sink, and then the autopilot would take over the mode that it was previously in, probably in you're in heading or V-lock. So that's kind of cool. So make changes. So if you press sync there, you can see the white sync comes up, and you can, like a temporary manual control of the autopilot to make changes. And you do that to change your vertical speed or your IAS, and then re-engage the IAS and vertical speed and take sync out. Clear as mud, but still probably easier than reading the manual. I think that's pretty much everything for the moment. Yeah, that's good. Next video I'm just going to take off, and you'll see it all a little bit more in action. And thanks for watching.